When my older brother was born, he was named after the legendary king. After winning the War of the Roses and married the White Princess, my father, Henry Tudor, made a grand entry to the newly united England with his beautiful families. After winning the hearts of his subjects, my father won acceptance of the European monarchy when Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the powerful Spanish Catholic monarchs, was betrothed to Prince Arthur. This formed a strong Anglo-Spanish alliance against France and brought a huge dowry to the Tudor family. However, the alliance was about to fall apart when Prince Arthur died 6 months after their marriage. So soon after I inherited Arthur's title as Prince of Wales, I inherited his wife. And in 1509, we became King and Queen of England after the death of my father. Although I could have married any available princess in Europe, I married Catherine of Aragon before Pope's dispensation and some unpaid dowry. I quickly showed the world my style of dealing with problems. 2 days after my coronation, I arrested 2 unpopular ministers and executed them the following year. Even at the young age of 18, I had no problem issuing pink slips with acts. When I became King of England, I was a dashing 17-year-old, stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with piercing blue eyes and blonde red hair. I was great with sports and music, but I was faithful to my young queen during our honeymoon before I started my non-stop affairs with many mistresses. Like a good queen, Catherine never protested. With Queen Catherine, we happily awaited our first child, only to see the babies stillborn or dead within days. After 7 years of waiting, we finally had Mary, before another dead baby marked the end of our hope. People thought I was cold and heartless, but they are wrong. I waited 24 years to divorce my first wife, who failed to give me a son. Talk about giving my best years. And I would have been a good ex-husband if she didn't fight me till her death.
I was a fool when I signed the agreement to marry you. Do you think I am still a fool?
People don't understand me. They thought I failed my duty to her, but they should know that she failed me. She failed to give me a son. That means I failed my most important duty as a king. If I did not love my first wife, I would have dumped her long ago. Did you know my second wife, Anne, was already pregnant with my daughter Elizabeth when we were married in 1533? Yes, Anne was intelligent, beautiful, and fun. But I did not marry her because I loved her. I married her because I needed a son. I felt cheated when Anne not only failed to give me the son she promised, she had 2 miscarriages in a year. She flirted with others and disrespected me. After Catherine died, I realized Anne was the one who killed her. She needed to be punished for what she had done. It was not my fault. It was hers. Of course, all the qualities of a woman should possess found were in Jane. Catherine never complained about my affairs, but Anne made it hell for me when she found that my heart belonged to someone younger, prettier, and wiser. I don't have 24 more years to waste, so Anne must go. Jane, will you give me the son that I've always wanted?
Yes.
Unlike Anne, whose goal in life was to be happy, Jane wishes only to make me happy. She gave me the son I wanted, even if it cost her her life. She also obeyed me and was kind to Princess Mary Elizabeth. Oh, God. What is worse than not having what you want is to have it and lose it. England cannot be without a queen. So I put my grief aside and tried hard to find my next queen. I fell in love with the sweet face of Anne of Cleves. She looked gentle and obedient. She was only 1 year older than my daughter Mary. I gave my heart to this young princess, but was devastated when I saw her in person. How can I, Henry VIII, the King of England, marry a woman who looked and smelt like a horse? She was nothing like what I saw in the portrait, and she was not my type. I like the slender ladies with big, beautiful eyes. Have you seen her eyes? I just couldn't do it. Or should I say, I had no appetite for horse meat like that. But unlike the other European princess I married, who refused to give up her post as Queen of England, Anne had no problem to my request for annulment. For that I gave her Richmond's Palace and Hever Castle. She never went back to her home. Maybe she was too embarrassed to go back, or she just loved England. Even though I called her my beloved sister, I am nicer to her than to my two real sisters. For one, I gave her the generous settlement instead of sending her to the block, which would be much, much cheaper. If I tell you that I never thought of Anne, I would be lying. I thought of her every time I saw Princess Elizabeth. But I remembered is the gorgeous, seductive Anne that captured my heart instead of the manipulating Anne I hate. Then I met Catherine Howard. She was like a young Anne I have never met. Vibrant, adorable, and full of energy. When I had my young 17-year-old queen in my arms, I felt like a 17-year-old again. She was my sweet, like my first Queen Catherine, beautiful like her cousin Anne, and obedient like my beloved Jane. But she is sweet only in her cover and obedient only when she was with me. She had lovers after lovers. I was betrayed not only by her people, but I showed lenience before, like Jane Boleyn. The widow of George Boleyn was an accessory to her adulterous affairs. I had to put the entire Howard family to prison. And this betrayal sent me into morbidity, and I started to indulge in food. I was told that she asked for forgiveness for her sins and thanked me for treating her so graciously before her death. But people said her last words were, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of a Culpeper." She is such a childish fool. She had the heart of a king and the crown for a queen, but she threw away her crown with her head. After 5 disastrous marriages, I was a 52-year-old man with a broken heart and a wounded leg and trapped in a body I could hardly move. My next choice of queen is Catherine Parr, an intelligent, twice widowed, 31-year-old. I would think she loved me as she had played perfectly the part of an obedient wife, an intelligent queen, and a loving stepmother. I left her so much money. She was the wealthiest woman in England, but she hastily married Thomas Seymour in just 6 months. She died soon after giving birth to her daughter, who also did not survive long. I should know that she wasted no time between husbands before I married her. But I just thought she loved me. I am Henry VIII, I am Henry VIII, I am. Did you know that I was very close to my sister, Princess Mary, when we were young? She was 5 years younger than me and extremely beautiful. I loved my little sister and named my first daughter Mary after her. Although I loved my sister, it was her duty and my responsibility to marry her for our country. When she was 11, I betrothed her to Charles, the future Holy Roman Emperor. Charles was only 8 years old then. However, I changed my mind and canceled the betrothal when the Holy Roman Emperor turned against me when I tried to divorce Catherine of Aragon. You see, Catherine was Charles's aunt. Hey, if you don't support me divorcing your aunt, then you don't get to marry my beautiful sister. In my time, princesses were political assets, critical in building foreign alliance. In 1514, when 52-year-old French King Louis XII's wife died, Cardinal Wolsey negotiated a peace treaty with France, and Mary was promised to marry the old Louis. Mary cried and begged me, but it was her duty. She, Princess Mary, became Queen of France. Just like a famous quote, "Don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Before departing, she asked me to let her pick her next husband when her current husband died. I agreed, as I had no plan to marry her again, at least at that time. Plus, I did feel sorry for her. My little sister had little confidence in me keeping my word, so she got that in writing. However, she was Queen of France for less than 3 months, when her husband, reputedly worn out by his exertions in the bedchamber, my plan for peace with France fell apart also. Counting on her to cement the relationship between England and France? She had to be superglued to make it work in 3 months. As she failed her duty to maintain peace between England and France, I felt I no longer needed to keep my promise to her. However, when I sent the Duke of Suffolk, Charles Brandon, to get her back, I made him promise not to even think of proposing to Mary, as everyone knows Charles was a ladies' man. Mary, although many considered her the reason for her late husband's quick death, may still be a useful asset for me. However, Mary persuaded Brandon to break his promise. They married secretly in a hotel in 1515. When I heard of this news, I was outraged. Even the Privy Council thought I should execute or at least imprison Charles Brandon. But my affection for both of them got the better of me. I let them go after they agreed to pay a heavy fine. £24,000 may not sound like a lot now, but it was equivalent to £7,200,000 today. Am I a good businessman or what? I first sold her off to the French king, then made her buy herself back. Mary and Brandon had 4 children. Both of her sons died young, and both were named Henry. I guess she thought I would be nicer to them if they were named after me. Her daughter, Lady Frances Brandon, married Henry Grey, 3rd Marquis of Dorset, and had 3 daughters. Lady Jane Grey was the chosen successor by my son Edward V. However, she was the 9-day queen when my daughter Mary defeated her troops. Eventually, Mary had to chop her head off after her father rebelled against the crown again. Mary died in 1533, less than a month after I married Anne. She lost my favor when she urged me not to marry Anne. You see, Anne was her lady-in-waiting when she was sent off to France, and she thought little of Anne. For that, I did not attend her funeral, nor have a last goodbye with her. Actually, when Mary came back to England, she was no longer close to me. Maybe she feared the brother who almost killed her husband may do so again if he found another good foreign match. Or she was angry for me turning back on my promise and bankrupted her husband. Either way, I had fond memories of the little girl who once adored her brother. Mary Why couldn't you understand that I could have killed Charles and made you a widow again when he broke his promise to me? I spared his life because I loved you. I am Henry VIII. You are all my subjects, and you must do what I tell you to do. My father ended the 32-year War of the Roses, while the foundation for a strong, united England formed in 1486, when my parents married. My mother, Elizabeth of York, the daughter of King Edward IV and niece of King Richard III, was heir of the White Roses, and my father, the Red Rose, claimed his place in history when he defeated Richard III. That marked the beginning of our Tudor dynasty. The political union between the two roses also marked the beginning of a great love story. My handsome, intelligent father rescued my mother from her evil uncle who brutally killed her two young brothers. Oh, isn't that beautiful? Many said that my mother married my father to protect her family. If that was her intention, she may have been very disappointed, as my father also viewed her family as a threat to her crown. And one by one, he chopped their heads off. Although history viewed me as much more lenient to my York cousins, I continued the unfinished mowing, and then my son Edward took over that job. However, because of my kindness and mercy, there was one York descendant alive in the Tower of London when my daughter Mary Tudor took over the crown. Although my mother was not the main attraction when my father proposed, my father gradually fell in love with his wife. My mother was a wonderful wife and mother. She had 8 children with my father: Prince Arthur, myself, my 2 younger brothers who died as infants, and 4 princesses, although only 2 of them survived. Life was quite different for royal princes and princesses. The eldest son, like my brother Arthur, was viewed as a hope for the nation. He was educated to be the king and live in his own castle, while I was allowed to be close to my mother and sisters. But after Arthur's death at age 17, the hope for House of Tudor landed on my shoulders, even when I was only 12 years old. My older sister, the 15-year-old Princess Margaret, was betrothed to James IV of Scotland when the two countries signed the Treaty of Perpetual Peace. And years later, my younger sister, Mary Tudor, married the French King Louis XII, 30 years her senior. Princesses were political assets. They had no free will to marry the man of their choice. Although King James was famous for having 4 mistresses and 5 illegitimate children before their marriage, my parents couldn't resist the thought of their grandson sitting on the Scottish throne. So in 1503, Margaret became Queen of Scots. In 7 years, she had 4 sons and 2 daughters, although only King James V survived. Despite a 16-year difference, Margaret and James seemed to be quite happy. That is, until my brother-in-law decided to take sides with France and fight against me. He died in the Battle of Flodden in 1513, leaving my sister, his infant son, and a baby on the way. I don't know how Margaret felt when her brother killed her, but I have to give Margaret credit for working with the Scottish nobles and keep things in control. Being a young widow in a country fighting a war with her brother, she needed allies, and soon formed one with the powerful House of Douglas. In no time, she fell in love with Archibald Douglas, 6th Earl of Angus, leader of the House of Douglas. Like two foolish teenagers, they secretly married on August 6th, 1514. That stupid move cost her the title as regent, since the late king's will specifically made her regent till she remarried. She also lost custody of her 2 sons. After several months of holding out in Stirling Castle, she surrendered and left the prince to their uncle, the new regent of Scotland, Duke of Albany. Now, Margaret, pregnant with Angus's child, returned to Edinburgh. I told her to bring her 2 sons to England. They were my nephews, the only male heirs to Tudor dynasty, but Margaret refused. She was afraid that James would lose the Scottish crown. But then she was pregnant with Angus's child. She fled to England and had her baby daughter, Lady Margaret Douglas. But her joy of having a daughter soon turned to grief when she learned her infant son, Duke of Ross, just died. What kind of mother leaves her defenseless son to the hands of others, especially the one who is next in line to be King of Scots? However, I took care of both my sister and her newborn baby, and I even welcomed and formed a family relationship with my brother-in-law, Earl of Angus, who was really a terrible choice. He left his wife and daughter and returned back to Scotland when the Scottish Council threatened to confiscate his estate. When poor Margaret got approval to go back to Scotland, she found the husband she sacrificed everything for had been living off of her money with a lover. She was furious and sent me a letter in 1518 asking for my support on her divorce.
I am sore troubled with Lord of Angus since my last coming into Scotland, and every day more and more, so that we have not been together this half year. I am so minded that, and I may by law of God and to my honour, to part with him, for I wit well he loves me not.
My support? Are you kidding? How dare anyone in my family marry without my permission? Of course, at that time, I did not realize how useful divorce could be when trying to get rid of an unwanted spouse. I told her no, but she did it anyway. One thing most people did not know was how much Margaret and I were alike. Way before I cut my second wife's head off in 1536, she ordered the firing of a cannon at her husband, Lord of Angus, in 1525, who I sent back to Scotland so they could work out their marital problems. And when she fell madly in love with Henry Stuart, the terrible 3rd husband of hers, she was so creative in her divorce petition, she even brought up the possibility that her first husband, King James V, may still be alive when she married Lord Angus, because they never found his body. If I were as good as her in divorce court, England may still be a Catholic country today. Actually, I was so upset with her, I protested against the shameless sentence sent from Rome. When her divorce was approved by the Pope, she was blindly in love, and soon she was pregnant again with the loser Henry Stuart. Margaret, I hate promiscuous women. You should have stayed a widow.
Look at you. You married 6 times. I only married 3.
But I am the king. And look at my wives, they're all beautiful. Look at your husbands. You have no taste. She soon realized that Lord Methven, whom she picked, desired other women and his wife's money only. When her daughter with him, Dorothea Stuart, died in infancy, she realized her mistake and tried to file divorce again. Time and time again, she wrote to me and appealed for money and protection. Of course, I sent neither. When Margaret died in 1541, she had 2 husbands she hated and a daughter she had not seen in years. However, her granddaughter, Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, was born the following year. And her daughter, Margaret Douglas, gave birth to her first grandson, Henry Stuart, 4 years after Margaret's passing. 25 years later, Queen Mary Stuart married her cousin, Henry Stuart. Although the union was disastrous, it united the 2 strongest claims to the English throne. 62 years after Margaret's death, her great-grandson James VI of Scotland became King of England after my daughter, Queen Elizabeth's death. Margaret, your blood has since run through every English royalty till today. I am Henry VIII, I am Henry VIII, I am. Go.